Thank you very much for joining, Hannah.
Hi, brilliant to be on. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I think I'll start off by just asking you to tell us a bit about yourself.
Amazing. So, I am 27 and I am part of like the neurodiverse community, but I've also worked and studied in the field as well. So, I have a real kind of big scope of neurodiversity and the benefits and challenges that it comes with it. Um, I was diagnosed with ADHD back when I was in school, and it's kind of just been a bit of a journey since then, really.
Okay. So was it an official diagnosis that you had?
So it was a bit tricky. The diagnosis I had was very much like an educational diagnosis.
Yeah.
And it's something that I wouldn't have even realized until I ended up in this kind of world that it wasn't a diagnosis in a normal sense. Um, so my diagnosis came about because I was really struggling with my exams. And in order to kind of figure out what was going on with that, I went for a dyslexia test. And during that test, the person who was doing the dyslexia test was like, I mean, I do think you are dyslexic, but I think that ADHD is more significant here. And from there, because I was approaching my exams, the school kind of pushed for me to go to I don't even know how to describe it, like a educational setting really, where I went and did some tests there, and she confirmed that it was an ADHD diagnosis. I had paperwork that meant that I could get support when I went to university. I got support in my exams at school. Um, so I've always presumed that it was an official ADHD diagnosis. Never thought there was a reason to question it. And then went to the doctors a couple of years ago, and they were like, "Well, there's no ADHD on your record, so we can't talk about medication." I was going for an autism diagnosis. They were like, "Well, there's nothing here about you being neurodiverse at all." And it was from there that I kind of realised that the diagnosis I've got, although it was through a professional, it doesn't really actually count for anything, which has definitely has its problems. So it was a bit of a tricky realization, and then went for the got onto the autism wait list probably about 3 years ago, and I'm still on that wait list now. So don't really know when I will get that diagnosis.
Wow. So how old were you at the time when you got that initial diagnosis?
So I would have been 17 when I started going for the test, and I think I got the diagnosis as I turned 18. So
Right.
it was right at the end of my time at secondary school, and I had my exams literally a couple of months later. So there was this massive rush from the school of being like, okay, we need to get this done. She needs something now so that she can get the support in place.
Right. And were there any other? 'Cause I know you said it was education. That was the exams that you was doing that sort of prompted it. Was there any sort of other things? Was it like relationship with friends or anything else that made you think, I wonder if there's something different about me than others?
I honestly, until like in retrospect, I had absolutely no idea.
Right.
Um, Once I started going down like my career path and started working with other people with autism, was when I started to realize that there were things that I struggled with that I thought everyone struggled with, and turns out they didn't. Um, and now I can look back as an adult and look at being a child, and my parents and stuff have done the same, and see all these signs and indicators that were there. Like I was consistently hyperfixated on different things. I struggled with like rejection sensitivity really hard when I was a child. I had quite significant anxiety. All of these things that played into play into that diagnosis now, really, that at the time we just kind of presumed were, I guess, like the neurotypical or even normal, I guess. And I never questioned that these weren't things that everyone did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So when you got that diagnosis, did it make you feel better, or was it? Because some people said that I've spoken, they say there's a sadness of it. Sometimes, and some people are happy they got a diagnosis. They know. What did you experience? What were your feelings?
Yeah, with the ADHD diagnosis, it was a lot of, I don't even know it was sadness, but it was kind of shock because
Right.
it was so out of the blue. No one had ever even suggested that that's what it could be. Um, and I was completely uneducated as well. I wrongly assumed that ADHD and autism were the same thing when I was 17 and was going through this. I thought that it was just something that people had when they got angry a lot, and my initial knowledge of what it was completely skewed, and I was just kind of shocked. And it took a lot of learning to realize, one, that ADHD and autism weren't the same thing, but also that they were completely different, and that the stereotypes that I had in my head of them were so different to what they actually are.
Right. Okay. And in regards to your work, so you said you've had history working with people that are disabled. Was there a particular reason for why you want to get into that sector? Was it to do with your own diagnosis or just other reasons?
It was a bit of an accident, really.
Right.
Well, it all kind of did spiral naturally from this. Because I hadn't done well in my exams, I ended up doing a health and social care BTEC. Um, Turns out I was really good with working with children, so went on to university and did a degree in early childhood.
Mm.
Um, and as part of that degree, we had to do some work experience, and I went on work experience to a charity that was local to me
Yeah.
that was for children with disabilities. And I did a week there and just absolutely fell in love with it. I started volunteering for the rest of my time at university, and then ended up working there as soon as I left uni.
Right.
And it all kind of just naturally progressed, and the interest and understanding, I think, really came into play. So many parents that I used to work with would be like, you just understand my child in a different way, and you
Right.
don't ever bat an eyelid at these certain things. And I think there was almost part of a connection there, that I understood that the frustration that they might be feeling or the way that they were acting, it just was something that I understood.
Yeah. I'm looking to get my own sort of diagnosis as well. It's a late diagnosis, but I've always felt that yeah, there's something a bit different to other people. And also, one thing that happened with my one of my previous events I did, I noticed that I was very more comfortable with people with autism, ADHD around me than people that don't have it. I just feel a bit that afraid or something. Like I don't know, it's a weird feeling, but I
Yeah,
felt more at home. So I was like, yeah, I've got to get this checked out.
yeah.
But do you ever have that sort of feeling? Do you ever have that feeling where you're with people that are not neurodiverse and you just feel that you have to be a certain way to be accepted? Do you get something like
Oh,
that?
absolutely. I think masking is such a significant thing. And I know that
Masking.
there's studies and stuff out there that say that when it comes to women, we are notorious for masking. It's why diagnosis with ADHD and autism is such a, um, I mean, it's historically always been seen as like a boy thing, really, hasn't it? And it's only recently that people are starting to become more aware that it's different and people show it differently. And I think I'm definitely like that. I can mask, and I can mask really effectively. I network a lot in my job, and it always shocks people when I then tell them that I am neurodiverse and I'm on that pathway, because they're like, well, you can talk, you can like work a room, you're happy with small talk. And I think it's because I mask it. I'm really good at that, and then by the time it's done, I'm exhausted. But I think
Oh,
you can definitely see the other people, like the way we talk and communicate, and you just connect with someone. You think, yeah, you are exactly like me. We can talk about this interest for ages. We've got that same kind of approach, really. So
yeah. I definitely felt when you said you feel exhausted. It's like literally going to the water, holding your breath, like, and you dive
yeah,
in, and then you do it, and you're out. Like, whew, well,
you
that's
really do, and
over.
that's a good analogy of it. It's
Yeah,
it's exhausting.
yeah, it is. Has that sort of influenced your relationships of like friends, family, like love interests? Is that? Do you think how you are, the person you are? Do you think that's influenced it in any sort of way?
I do think so. I think, especially again, as I've gotten older, the friends that I've made in adulthood and like the relationships I've had in adulthood have very much ended up being with people who are also neurodiverse,
Right.
because I think we have those same energies and approaches to things. But it's definitely, again, that masking came into play with my earlier friendships and earlier relationships. I tried to be someone that I wasn't. And once I realised that there was a reason behind why I didn't feel the way my relationships are completely changed. I think one of the big things is I'm now very comfortable at saying, I, I'm exhausted. I want to go home, or this is a change of plan, and I can't really cope with that. So,
Yeah.
and my friendships are a lot more of accepting and understanding that, whereas they probably always would have been, but I was always so scared to be a little bit different or miss out before.
Yeah. And do you have any of the sensory sort of issues? Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, so I struggle with noise quite a lot.
Okay.
So for me, noise in crowds is quite significant. I tend to wear like loop or flare like ear pieces when I go into like London or to concerts, just because it's like the background noise just feels like it's getting closer and closer and closer on me, and it's completely overwhelming. So that's kind of a big one. Unexpected loud noises as well. I struggle with those. And I do, like, sensory stuff is again something I'm almost like learning about myself as we go along.
Yeah.
Things like getting too hot I can find very overwhelming. If I have been in an environment that's very overwhelming, the then like burnout that follows it kind of is all stuff that is like I'm learning about now, but just makes complete sense. But noise is definitely a big sensory thing for me.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't ask you before. What part of the UK are you based?
So I'm down south, about an hour out of London.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because I'm in London. I know. Yeah, when I go to Oxford Circus, I try and avoid places like that in Camden. It's in rush hour because it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Seeing a lot of people, a lot of crowds, and things like this. For me, I don't really have any sort of noise sensory issues, but sometimes things can get overwhelming if my phone's going, if there's someone on the TV and someone's talking. It can be a bit sort of like, let me just like, I need to get out of here for a moment. I'll just use an excuse just to go to the toilet or something like that. And just sort of like
have that moment to breathe.
to have that moment to breathe. So you've had a sort of history. Have you had a history working in schools or things like this?
So I have a bit of an overlap. So I worked I still do, but I work for charity, and the charities that I've worked for, both of them now have worked closely with schools. So I've been in schools. I did a lot of work experience in schools and just couldn't hack it. For me, it was too overwhelming.
Right.
There was a lot of noise. And again, I've always been drawn to the neurodiverse kids in the class. So those bigger classrooms were always a bit too much for me. So I've had quite a lot of interaction, both in classrooms working with kids, but also talking to members of staff and teachers.
Right. And how do you find that they're handling neurodiversity in the schools? Do you think they're handling it well? Is there like a progression, like an awareness now, or do you think there needs to be a bit more done?
I think it's a bit of both, really. The biggest issue is that schools are so, understaffed and haven't got the finances. I think there's a much bigger awareness of neurodiversity now, and there's a lot more people that want to be able to help and know that there's things they could do to help, but because of the resources they have, they're not able to. Since COVID, especially from what I've seen in my jobs, it's becoming trickier and trickier. The wait lists are getting so much more significant because COVID has heightened some of these things that maybe people wouldn't have noticed before.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of children that aren't making it into school. The school refusal numbers are quite significant now because, again, they've had this time away from school. They've seen that they can be so much happier when they are in their household and not having to face some of those challenges, that it's just terrifying, that anxiety to go in. So I think there's a lot more schools could do to support that. But again, it's completely resources and having that time. And I think it is a lot of time. You need to have someone who can provide one-to-one support, who can pick up on the things that are needed, adapting classrooms to make things more accessible. There's just so much that could be done, but isn't being done at the moment.
Okay. This may put you on the spot, but what do you think could be done? Do you have any examples that you would think that they can introduce that would actually help?
I think communication's a big one. Something that I've seen a lot is that schools don't necessarily realise that they need to prepare for their children for changes that are coming about. Obviously, transitions are a massive trigger for a lot of people with neurodiversity, not knowing what's happening next, being a change in routine, all of that can be really triggering. And I don't think schools necessarily take the time to prepare the students for that. Things like if there's going to be a different teacher in the classroom, having clear visuals and clear plans about these things that are going to happen. Having, visuals are a great thing. There are things called PECs that can be used that are literally visual timetables, and that can be really useful. Prepare it, and again, transitions, having different spaces when it comes into going into the classroom, coming out of the classroom, different spaces for break time, and not expecting every child to do the same thing. There's almost this expectation that all of the kids are going to go from classroom to playground, they're going to be happy, and actually those differences, the playground's got a lot more people in it, there's a lot more different sensory elements to a playground, and having different options like classrooms to go to or libraries to go to, especially in primary schools, could be an easy fix, I think. But again, that then relies on there being staff in all those places.
Yeah, yeah. Just as you were saying that, I was thinking one of the things that affect me would be when I'm working, and they have these social sort of events and social networking things to get everyone together. I mean, it is good, but I would like there to be an option of not being able to do it and not being
Yeah.
sort of like, seen as not a team player or seen as
Yeah.
not, I think there is that thing. There should be like an awareness. Even someone said to me as well, there should be an option if there, you have these virtual team calls now where someone may not want to have their screen on, but
Yeah.
that sort of thing. I think that's, but they feel they're scared to say something, or it would harm their sort of
Yeah.
position in the workforce.
And I think, like, for adults, we have that ability to communicate, and there's all those pressures of, like you say, fear for the being seen a certain way, or if it might affect your career. But as a kid, having the actual language to be able to say that is why they want to do it is often not there. And obviously, you're told to listen to your teachers and not to act differently. And it kind of, we almost condition children from a very young age to not embrace their neurodiversity and say when things need to be different.
Yeah, yeah. And what sort of what advice would you give someone who suspects that they could be neurodivergent? Yeah, at a young or older age, what advice would you give them?
I think getting on the wait list is a good starting point. I don't think anyone realizes quite how substantial the wait lists are. So, and even if you don't think being formally diagnosed is going to have much of a difference, I think it's useful just to have it there for if you do ever need to have that information. And for like workplaces or school, it can have benefits. But I also think if you think you're neurodiverse, don't be afraid to start asking for kind of reasonable adjustments. I think there's a lot of people who think, and I'm definitely guilty of it, is sometimes I will be very careful to say I'm on the wait list for autism and I have this educational diagnosis of ADHD, rather than saying, okay, well, I am actually neurodiverse. Just because I'm waiting for one doesn't mean that I'm not. And I think, taking that kind of approach early on and saying to people, like allowing for those sort of reasonable adjustments in all aspects of your life, not just work, but with friends. If your friends all want to do something that's not going to work for you, actually addressing it and not being afraid to say that that's the reason why. And a big thing I always think is that my true friends aren't going to be bothered if I say those things. If they actually care about me, they will happily either not be offended when I don't go to something or make changes so that I can.
Yeah, yeah. When you tell someone that, okay, you're autistic or you're neurodiverse, do you ever get the sense of that this fear, like this stigma that you're not being believed, or you're just saying that just to say that? Does that ever come into your mind, or it doesn't at all?
It definitely is quite situational when it comes to speaking something like this, or in my work capacity. I talk quite a lot on because I have this degree in learning disabilities. I've got this experience. When I then start to talk about it, I then feel like I have to justify where I am in my diagnosis process, because I feel like people won't take me as seriously in that perspective.
Yeah.
But when I'm talking to kind of friends or other people like that, I don't necessarily feel so worried about it, because I think the minute I say that I am, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And on that same line, do you think there's an embarrassment of saying you're autistic, or do you think now we're at a stage where it's accepted and it's normal to say it and it's not anything to be scared of? Or do you think there's still that sort of, oh gosh, they're going to think I'm weird? Or you think that still sort of exists, that sort of way of thinking?
If you'd asked me a couple of months ago, I would have said I think everyone understands what neurodiversity is now, and I think that we're in a much more inclusive space, and that it's suitable to say who you are and what you need. However, I think the way things are in like the political climate in like the US and stuff like that at the moment has suddenly made me realise that things haven't actually changed as much as I thought they had. And
Really?
Seeing a lot of posts and stuff on LinkedIn at the moment about how challenging it can be to work in like equality and diversity, and how people are being forced back into the offices and things like that. And it's just these small things make you realise that actually I think there are some people who still don't get it, but the community that then comes together around it is just incredible. Yeah. And I think that we, as a neurodiverse community and our kind of allies, we are really working together to make things a lot more inclusive and for people to be a lot more aware. So I think although we're quite a small group, our voices are quite loud.
Yeah, yeah, I do agree with you. I do think it's getting better, but as you said on LinkedIn, I do see posts that make me think it's this kind of like, oh, buck up and suck
Yeah.
it up and that sort of. I do think that, and there's this big push actually I've noticed for coming back into the office. I was
Yeah,
thinking maybe it's
definitely.
all the real estate they have. It's like we need to fill, we need to fill this space. We're paying these bills. I don't know, but I've noticed a big surge recently in this, and it's kind of like, oh. I saw this post and it was quite annoying actually. You had like someone working from home, but they were doing the shopping and had Netflix on. It had all these things. It's like, oh, this is what your employees are doing when they're working from home. It's giving that sort of sense. I was
Yeah.
like, no, that's not. To be honest, I don't know about you, but for working from home, I probably do more work because I'm more the way I am. I'm conscious that I can do more, and two, I think that they think I'm not working enough. So I'll go the
Yeah.
extra mile. So you'll actually get more out of me.
Oh yeah, 100%. I completely agree. I think that it just completely, the whole return to work thing is just going to shoot people down who absolutely will thrive in a working from home environment. So I think that, yeah, I think that's where a lot of the negativity is coming from on these things at the moment. But
Yeah, yeah. And I worked with someone that was autistic, and I remember the issues that were arising was not the product that he was producing, it was the way he went about it. And
mm,
I think they didn't understand it was not like conventional to the methods that they're used to. And I think there's awareness and it's happened where as long as you're getting from A to Z, the journey may be a bit different. But that's just the way that person or some people may
yeah,
work. But you've got to understand it's not, you're not going to go for the typical route that you may do. But if the work is of a good value, of a good level, that should be considered. I do
yeah,
think there's that.
yeah,
Needs to,
absolutely. It
yeah.
takes some of that pressure off that trying to, because I don't think there's necessarily an understanding of how much effort goes into trying to fit in. And if you take that out, that effort can go on to working from and being working from home completely allows that for some people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And also think as well with this return to work, I think you're excluding because I think the good thing about remote working is the pool was better and great in regards to the quality because there's people that if it's for a London position, let's just say there's people in Wales that can do it. There's people
Mm.
abroad, that can do this job. They can work
Yeah,
now and they can provide. So you're actually increasing the chances of better quality. You think like that, but that's just my sort of thinking
yeah,
and my viewpoint of it.
completely with you.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything you'd like to sort of add, or if anyone's watching this, is there any sort of message that you'd like to leave?
I just think be comfortable with who you are. I would have given anything back when I was a teenager to have someone say to me, it's okay not to fit in, and you don't have to like the same things as everyone else. You don't have to try and be a certain way. And I think it's just such an important message through and through. Be yourself, and you will kind of attract the people in your life and the roles in your life and the right kind of space by being yourself. You'll find people who are just like you. And there's so many people out there who will have the same hyperfixations, will be overwhelmed by the same things. And as long as you're authentic, you'll find those people.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your sort of viewpoints and your story as well. I've noticed since doing this, I always get a message, an underlying message from each sort of interview and this sort of conversation. I think it's the whole, what you've really shown me is this be comfortable in your own skin, like be yourself and don't be afraid. And I do think there is this, when you're masking and trying to fit in a certain, certain way of being, and I think that it can be detrimental to to what you can bring. So I think
Yeah,
there needs to be an awareness on that. But yeah, be comfortable in your own skin. I think that's definitely
absolutely.
something that I can take. But yeah, thank you so much, and yeah, lovely speaking with you.
Thank you very much.